Atlanta in the late 80s and early 90s was bubbling with creativity. This was before the city fully cemented itself as the epicenter of hip-hop, but the energy was there. The streets had their own rhythm, and the young kids growing up in the neighborhoods were soaking it all in, mixing old school soul with the new sounds of hip-hop that were sweeping the nation. And in the middle of it all were two kids who had no idea that they were about to change the game. James Christopher Kelly and Christopher Smith weren't just friends, they were more like brothers. They met in elementary school and clicked immediately. Both of them had this natural charisma, a swag that couldn't be taught. They were those kids who just had it, long before anybody put a mic in their hands or a contract in front of them. Growing up, hip-hop was their soundtrack. Dr. Dre, Ice Cube, Run DMC, and LL Cool J were some of their biggest inspirations, but it wasn't just rap that shaped them. Atlanta had deep roots in soul and funk, so artists like Al Green and the Isley Brothers were always playing in the background. That combination of influences, hard-hitting beats with smooth melodies, was already setting them up for something different. Then, one day in 1991, fate stepped in. They were just two kids hanging out at Greenbrier Mall when they caught the eye of Jermaine Dupri. Now, Dupri was young himself, but he already had an ear for talent. When he saw Kelly and Smith, something clicked. It wasn't just the way they carried themselves, it was the raw potential, the energy that made people stop and pay attention. At first, the boys didn't take it seriously. They weren't actively trying to be rappers, but Dupri saw something in them. He convinced them to give it a shot, and what started as a casual conversation in a mall turned into the foundation of one of the most unexpected hip-hop success stories of the decade. Dupri wasn't just some random producer, he was a visionary. He knew that hip-hop was shifting, and he saw a lane that nobody had filled yet. There had been kid rappers before, sure, but not like this. Not with this kind of style, this level of cool, this kind of swag that felt effortless instead of forced. So he got to work, and over the next 2 years, he took these two kids from Atlanta and transformed them into something the world had never seen before. By 1992, Kris Kross wasn't just a rap duo, they were a movement. Their debut single, Jump, didn't just climb the charts, it dominated them. 8 weeks at #1 on the Billboard Hot 100. That's unheard of, even for seasoned artists. And here were two kids barely in their teens, setting records and taking over the airwaves. But it wasn't just the music, it was the style. The moment they stepped on the scene with their clothes turned backward, it was a wrap. Everybody wanted to be like them. Schools across the country were filled with kids walking around with their jeans and jerseys flipped, thinking they were the coolest thing on the block. And honestly, they were. Their debut album, Totally Crossed Out, went quadruple platinum. That's 4 million copies sold. And they weren't just a hip-hop act, they had crossed over into pop culture. They were everywhere. MTV, award shows, magazines. Kris Kross had the kind of visibility that artists twice their age would kill for. But here's the thing about blowing up so fast, it doesn't last forever. The music business is ruthless. One minute, you're the hottest thing out. The next, people have moved on to the next big act. And for Kris Kross, that shift happened quicker than they expected. Their second album, Da Bomb, dropped in 1993. It went platinum, which is still a major accomplishment. But compared to the success of their debut, the industry considered it a drop-off. The fans were still there, but hip-hop was evolving. The sound was getting grittier, and artists like Tupac and Biggie were taking over. The youthful, playful energy that Kris Kross brought to the table wasn't the trend anymore. And then there were the industry politics. The same people who had praised them in 1992 were now calling them a gimmick. Record labels weren't pushing them the same way, and suddenly the machine that had built them up wasn't moving with the same force. But the hardest part? Growing up in front of the world. Imagine being 13, 14 years old and having the entire industry watching your every move. You're not even old enough to drive, but you're making more money than most adults. People expect you to always be that same kid they first fell in love with, but you're growing up, your voice changes, your style evolves, you're figuring out who you are while millions of people are judging you. By the time their third album, Young, Rich, and Dangerous, came out in 1996, the writing was already on the wall. It was clear that Kris Kross was fighting an uphill battle. They had talent, but the industry had already moved on. So like so many young stars before them, they faded from the mainstream. But for Chris Kelly, that fall from fame came with a much darker battle. When the spotlight fades, a lot of artists struggle to adjust. For some, it's a loss of identity. You go from being the center of attention to feeling like nobody cares anymore. And for Kelly, that struggle led him down a dangerous path. He started dealing with substance abuse, something that was hidden for years. A lot of people around him knew, but in the entertainment industry, people don't always step in. As long as the money is flowing, as long as the shows are happening, a lot of the real issues get swept under the rug. By the 2000s, Kris Kross was mostly out of the public eye. They would reunite here and there, but it wasn't the same. Then, in 2013, the news hit. Chris Kelly had passed away from an overdose at just 34 years old. It was devastating for his family, for his friends, for the fans who had grown up with him. This was a kid who had once been on top of the world, and now he was gone far too soon. His death was a reminder of how fame isn't always what it seems. The industry had built Kris Kross up, but when the machine moved on, Kelly was left trying to navigate life without that structure, that purpose. And unfortunately, he lost that battle. After Kelly's passing, Christopher Smith took a different route. He stepped away from music and focused on building something new. He launched his lifestyle brand, Urbane Muse, using fashion and creativity to carve out a space that allowed him to express himself. Smith has been private about his struggles, but one thing is clear: he still carries Kris Kross with him. He still honors his best friend. And while the group's story ended on a heartbreaking note, their impact lives on. Kris Kross was more than just a rap duo. They were a moment in time. They represented a generation of black kids who saw themselves in those two boys from Atlanta. Kids who dreamed big, who made the impossible look easy. Their story is a reminder that fame isn't forever, that the industry takes more than it gives, and that behind every hit song, there's a real person trying to hold on to who they are. Rest in peace, Kris Kelly. Your legacy will never be forgotten.